We have some questions here from Noble Cooper as well. They're asking, what are our favorite games? Are they more from this era or more from back in time? And they're also asking, what age is a good age to play certain games like maybe Metal Gear or Resident Evil or something like that, or GTA? Or is it about age or is it about mentality? So you keep asking me questions, but what do you think about these?
Okay. I mean, going back to, to his most recent question, I definitely prefer. I don't have a preference in terms of time period. I do enjoy the simplicity of games back in the day, like the original Civilization, the original Command and Conquer. Like for RTSs, I believe they became very complicated. Um, Even Civilization itself with diplomacy and stuff, even though people like love it, I think that's made the game more complicated in a good way, in some ways. But for me, I've enjoyed it less. But overall, like for that particular question, I think games, every genre of games and every sort of generation has been fun and enjoyable. And you mentioned mentality. I think definitely some games mentality definitely makes sense, but at the same time, some games like I played the original Doom when it came out in the 90s, and I was like 12 years old, and um, in in South Africa, and if you're new to the show, right, like South Africa, houses and land are very very cheap because it's a big country with. We have the same population as South Korea, but like 10 times more land. Uh, so, my house, we had a main house. We had like two smaller houses on the properties. We had like three houses on the same property. And so we had a computer was outside of the main house. And in between the main house and the computer, like where we kept the computer. So I was playing Doom one night, I remember, and I was killing stuff. And then I was like, after I finished, I'm like, oh my God, it's like pitch black outside because there's no lights. I'm like, oh my God, I want to go back to my house and go to bed, but it's too scary. And so I think mentality does make sense, like with a game like GTA, because there are themes that I think kids could misunderstand or not understand appropriately. Like I just saw the news today. GTA 5 is being remastered, and they're removing transphobic themes from GTA 5. And I think as a kid, you look at that, and that might become your opinion if you're a young kid. Because I know young kids like Adam I have taught, or like some I have taught, have played GTA 5 when they were like in junior high school and younger, maybe. And that I think can sort of give kids the impression like, oh, this thing is bad or this thing is good. This is appropriate to do. This is how you treat women in life. And some kids, yes, some kids no, but I think it's you're better off. And this goes against what Adam said about personal responsibility and stuff. I think companies or governments need to control that in a sense, because you just some parents are just going to let their kids go crazy.
That is
Um,
true.
so yeah, so I think personality, and there needs to be sort of some games need to be age restriction, and parents really do need to care what are the kids doing in gaming, what are the kids doing online as well. What about you, Adam?
As far as this era back in time, I mean, I've enjoyed games all from the past up until modern times. So I don't know if I've my enjoyment has grown. I wouldn't say it's definitely not shrunk. I don't know if it's grown or not. I don't know. Think I would necessarily say that, but I will say that if you gave me a game that is a modern game, and then you gave me an older game that I had never heard of or played before, I'd probably end up enjoying the more modern game than I would the older game. Just because you can do so much more with it, just the technological advances that we've had and your ability to do things. So that's not to say that one is necessarily better than the other, but I think if you just gave me two games and didn't tell me, two games I had never heard of, and said sit down, play these two, which one are you, and then at the end said which one did you enjoy more, without knowing, I would probably naturally gravitate to a more modern game, just because there's more you can do with it, and that sort of thing. I probably would enjoy it more, but that doesn't mean I necessarily would. I mean, something like Final Fantasy Tactics, I love Tactics. I play Tactics all the time. I always go back to it, and I keep playing SRPGs hoping I'll get that feeling. and I never do, and I always go back to Tactics. I think probably the closest I've gotten is Other Side, which I absolutely enjoyed. Um, but even then, Other Side does not have, you get 4 classes. Tactics had 15.
Wow.
So yeah, it had tons of classes, maybe 12, I don't know, but it had tons of classes. There's just so much you could do with it. And, so yeah, it really would depend on the game. But I would say in general, the modern era is better just because the, older games are the previous era. Newer games are the previous era plus. We still have games in that style, and we have newer games, and we have, because indies still go back and make games in that style. So I would say modern gaming, and then plus two, like back then, you know, there was no real indie scene. Getting a game on the Genesis or the Super Nintendo would not have been easy. You basically had to have a gaming company to do it. Now anybody can be a programmer or anybody can be a game designer. So there's just so much more variety now. You have so many more options. And yeah, the big AAA games, do get kind of samey. Like I said, I've never played Fortnite, but the fact that they're getting rid of build mode to me is disappointing because you're taking variety away and you're making everything more samey, and I find that disappointing. I understand it from a financial standpoint, where they say if these are more popular, why would we want to make the less popular game? Obviously we want to make our game the most popular, so we're gonna fit modern trends. But I feel bad about that. I feel sad for that. But there's still tons of indie stuff out there. So for that, I would definitely say I prefer the modern era. As for the other one, as for should what's a good age to play, um, what's a good age to play certain games? I definitely do think there are probably certain cutoffs. I would probably lower them a little bit lower than what they are right now. For example, a mature game, like a rated R movie. We say 18. We set that as the cutoff point. I would say there's definitely some 16-year-olds or 15-year-olds that could handle it and understand it. I think the reason that we do put it at something like 18 is maybe erring on the side of caution, where we're saying like, yeah, there are definitely some 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds that can handle it, but pretty much 90% of 18-year-olds will be able to handle it. Whereas with 15-year-olds, it might be like a 40% or even a 60%, but you still have a large part of the group which maybe can't. Whereas with 18, we're saying the vast majority of people are able to handle this. So I do think the bars are typically set a little bit higher for safety. But like for example, with rated R movies, a kid can't buy a ticket to a rated R movie, or at least shouldn't be able to. But a parent, they can go with a parent. If a parent buys that, and a parent, so a parent can buy a ticket, and you could take a 13-year-old into a rated R movie, and that's always been considered fine as long as a parent buys it for you. So in that sense, I do agree that you could definitely set some bars where you say like, okay, we're setting this as the basic limitation. We're going to naturally lock this. For instance, if you had a game and you said the default parental lock says, that you cannot play this game unless your account age is 18 or whatever, and then a parent can go in with a parental account and unlock it, I would be fine with that. I would be fine with putting putting a limitation on it if you have the option of going back and saying, you know what, I think my kid can handle this. I don't think it should be like a everybody has to follow the rules. I'm a bit of the rebel, as they said there. But I'm fine with saying like this is the bar, and if you feel the bar is set a little bit too high, you can lower it yourself. But we're setting it here. I'm fine with that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I agree with Noble Cooper here, where
Yeah.
stories have evolved. Where I've definitely cried a lot more in modern gaming than I have in the past. I think the first game where I really cried was Final Fantasy VII, obviously. Um, and then I didn't cry at a game for a really long time until I think the next one was uh, Shadow of the Colossus, because I remember at the time thinking there have been 2 games, and then when I played Valkyria Chronicles, then I was like, okay, there's 3 games now. And then all the Valkyria Chronicles I've played have done it. So it's like, okay, now all the Valkyria Chronicles have done it. Even when I was playing Omori, I was like, on stream, I'm like, yep, ha 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 ha, my eye. But I was tearing up, I was fighting it. So yeah, it definitely, And in some games like Omori, that's definitely a more mature storytelling. You could tell that story back in the day. I know that there were people who played Final Fantasy VI, which was Final Fantasy III at the time in the U.S., who cried when Sid died. Um, as that that when that was not a guaranteed thing. Depending on certain choices that you made, he would die or he wouldn't. And I know that there were people that cried over that. So definitely it was possible, but I'd say I've definitely see it a lot more now.